Hello and welcome back to another episode of the On the Sideline podcast with Jackson and Kyle. I am Jackson, and I am joined here, as always, by a man who thinks that you should just turn this video off because we're talking about the AFC South, and it's the most boring division in football. I'm joined here with Kyle. Kyle, how are you doing?
I'm not bad. I think it's great that everything's in full swing, but, leave it to my luck. Sports are back, and the Red Sox season is already virtually over. And, of course, the Bruins look like they're going to get the 4 seed here in these play-in games for the NHL playoffs. So I guess that's how that's going. But overall, pretty good.
Yes, tough life being a Boston sports fan. We thoughts and prayers for you, Kyle. Yeah. Just so you guys know, if you want to listen to the audio only feed, you can check on pretty much any other audio feed. It should be on like any podcast distributor. It should be on there. But anyways, let's just jump into like the hockey and NBA being back. What are your general thoughts of? I guess let's start with hockey. You brought hockey up. What do you think about? What were your first reaction to hockey?
The games are a little sloppy. I've noticed that early on, but that's kind of expected. I think it's pretty interesting. I feel like there's been a lot of really bad takes on the idea that the games are now boring without fan interaction or fans being in attendance. Mm-hmm. And it hasn't bothered me whatsoever. I think it affects the players more than it would ever affect other fans watching on TV. I think that what a lot of these sports have done for television broadcasts have already been phenomenal going in before we had a pandemic. And the idea that fans aren't in the stands has not bothered me no matter the sport. I think it's awesome being able to just sit down and watch the games. I don't care about the sounds of fans cheering.
Yeah, I think that was my biggest takeaway seeing this is I do think that it's a little bit more fun with the fans, but I was watching an NBA game. I forget who said it, but someone was like, it's kind of just like a TV show now. And I was like, yeah, that's basically what it is. I mean, we have these TV shows all the time that just don't have. Most TV shows we watch don't have live audiences. It's not that weird. I do think the NHL is probably the most unusual one watching it, just because typically you see fans right there, whereas typically in basketball. The basketball one's also pretty noticeable. Baseball, I'm a Rays fan. I'm used to seeing no fans in the crowd. But yeah, I thought it was good. I decided I didn't really. I was trying to get more into the hockey playoffs, so I decided to bet on all of the first games of round one of this play-in, best of 5 thing. And so far, I'm 1 for 6 on my selection. Yeah. Luckily, the Canadiens pulled the win out in overtime. That was my one win. I was going crazy on Jonathan Drouin. The worst penalty shot attempt I think I have ever seen. Did you see the Jonathan Drouin penalty shot?
I didn't see his penalty shot, but it couldn't have been worse than Brad Marchand earlier in the year, where he moved the puck backwards.
Right. That one was a tough one too. But no, he just completely went for a backhand, lost control of the puck, never even got it on net. This is a penalty shot in overtime. Not a great look, but Canadiens still won the game. That was fun, I thought. Let's just go into the Rockets. I want to talk to you about the Rockets game for a second, because I'm totally in on Houston. I think Houston is the most fun team to watch in the NBA.
No, I actually thought the other team. I'm a big guy. I'm a big fan of Luka Doncic and what he's been able to do this past season. I do think that if the voting were to happen for NBA, he should be a top 5 MVP guy, because they had efficiency-wise, their offense was historically great in efficiency and one of the best, or statistically one of the best offenses in basketball. And he's seemingly the singular star. He's taken a lot of what James Harden kind of does, but I think the ball movement in Dallas is a lot better than what Houston does. And they also don't bitch like the Houston Rockets do, which is nice to have, because, man, anytime, James Harden takes a shoulder, his hands are up in the air. PJ Tucker loses his mind every time he gets a call not going his way. Russell Westbrook loses his mind. It's like, I just can't believe how many times these guys bitch about calls. And they get the most free throws all the time.
Well, they also get fouled the most amount of times. But I don't know. I love the passion they're bringing. I love the whether you hate the Rockets or love the Rockets, you care about them every time you're watching them play. And I think that this small ball style of offense, it's always leading to a ton of high scoring games, and it's always leading to close games. I think it's great. So are you Luka is greater than Harden guy?
Not right now. No, I'm also a
Okay.
James Harden fan. I mean, Harden's still probably right now the third or fourth best player in the league. You know, when Golden State's in it, I think Steph's still better. But Harden's easily up there in the top 3 or 4 players in basketball. I mean, I think Luka eventually is going to surpass that. You know, he's still 21. I think that you know, I don't know. I feel like Houston missed their opportunity. I thought 2018 was really their chance. You know, they had that run where it looked like they were going to stop Golden State, and they looked like they would have coasted to the finals, and they would have beaten the Cavs pretty easily that season. And they blew that last game. I think it was, what was it? They missed 27 threes or something to end the game.
I mean, also Chris Paul getting injured.
Of course. I mean, there's a lot of variables to it.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that was their shot. I mean, I think this thing is, with PJ Tucker, Robert Covington, whoever you want to put at center, you know, this sort of positionless basketball is fun. I just don't think it's going to work through 4 rounds. I think the playoffs, especially once this gets going into a playoff setting, is too physically demanding for those guys to play potentially 7 games through 3 or 4 rounds to play, you know, go against guys like, you know, what are they going to do against Anthony Davis? You know, what are they going to...
The same thing they did last time they played him. They beat the Lakers last time they played him with small ball. Like, I think that here's my thing with the Rockets. I'm not someone who's saying, like, I think that they're, like, unstoppable, but I think this small ball has given them a chance where I think there's certain teams they match up poorly against. I actually thought Dallas was a team they matched up really poorly against. Like, that was, like, probably, like, one of the worst teams they could go up against, which is why I think that win was pretty meaningful for them. But I do think that they're a team where, like, I think they match up well against a team like the Lakers. I mean, we saw when they played like the Jazz with Rudy Gobert, he was rendered completely useless. So this it's a total matchup thing, and the odds are that in 4 rounds, one of their matchups is going to be bad and they're going to get knocked out. But I think that there is like this now like 5% chance that they can win it all, whereas before I don't think they had even that.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't think it'll work long term. I thought that game said a lot more about the Mavericks and where they're at right now. You know, they still struggle to close a lot of games. Doris Burke was talking a lot about that on the broadcast, how their late game troubles have pretty much continued into the bubble. I think, you know, Mavericks were up big in the third quarter, and I think early in the fourth quarter they were up pretty good as well. And Luka's shot seemingly just wasn't falling. He was throwing bricks up there all day from 3. You know, he hits a few of those shots, that game's probably over. And I don't know. I feel like Mavericks are going to be a better team. I think that they lost that game because they gave it away at the end. But I'm not sold on Houston being the team that's going to – I would bet more on Houston or Dallas and Portland making a deeper run than Houston right now.
I don't know. I don't see it. I think that, again, we've gone a little bit long on the Rockets, but we might have to just agree to disagree. But I don't know. I mean, I think that when the Rockets are playing their best basketball, they're unstoppable. It seems like they haven't been playing their best basketball a lot, which is part of the thing as well. You know, Covington went 0 for 8 before he finally hit that 1-3 in overtime as well. So there's, I don't think either team played their best basketball that game. And definitely, I mean, I'm not going to pretend like the Mavericks missing shots at the end didn't hurt anything, but I don't know. We'll have to agree to disagree, and we'll wait. Maybe put a pin in that one. Maybe we can talk about the Rockets more another time. We've got a lot to get to for this podcast. What are your thoughts? So, the Rockets season may or may not be in jeopardy. It's very similar to the MLB season, which may or may not be in jeopardy. A lot of craziness going on in baseball. This, definitely. Some worries now with a lot of teams getting infected. But what have your thoughts been on, now that we've seen baseball for a little over a week?
I'm afraid baseball's not going to make it to August is my feeling. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't really know what other way to put it. Like, I think that
we're in August.
Well, the end of August, I mean. It's not going to make it through August. Yes.
Gotcha.
So, I just feel like there's a lot of issues, obviously, with what's happened because, they don't have any mandate on what players can do outside the field. And I think that's a major problem because, when the NBA and MLS decided to go into this bubble system and now the NHL is following suit, it's seemingly once you're in, you don't leave. These players have to sign on to doing this for a multi-month process that they don't leave the bubble until their team's out. The MLB, they did have a 60-game season, so that's kind of tough. I understand that. But at the same time, I think a lot of the players, playing for a paycheck probably would have bought into that system, and they just seemingly just decided not to do it. I feel like there was a simple solution that would have been, we're going to use our 4 stadiums in the Tampa area for spring training and our 4 stadiums in the Scottsdale area for spring training, or 6 stadiums, I think it is in Scottsdale, and said those are our 2 bubble locations. We're just going to be there for the season. Instead, they try to take a risk of doing it at these home fields for seemingly no reason, and now all these players are testing positive because they're all going out after these games because they have the right to, and that's what they decided to do. But now the MLB is facing the repercussions of it. I don't know where this goes. I don't know how you fix this now as you already started this season.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, baseball is probably the most difficult sport. I think we were talking about it being the easiest at first because the sport itself is naturally socially distanced. But again, like you see, like these. I mean, I think the one thing they could have done is just like actually mandate that like you can't be within 6 feet of anybody unless you're actually playing the game. But I just telling them like, hey, try to socially distance. When there's a walk off, they're going to celebrate. So like, I think there has to be more hard and fast rules. But I don't know. At the same time, I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to sit here and say anything. But it's looking like it's in trouble. And I'm just hoping that, with the NFL season being a big part of my yearly revenue, I'm hoping that they learn the mistakes from MLB. And I think it'll be a little easier for NFL because it's 1 game a week as opposed to 1 game a day, which I think will make things easier. Let's talk about the one interesting thing we got from baseball. Joe Kelly being propped up as a national hero at this point with throwing multiple pitches that came close to hitting Houston Astros. He even made faces at Springer, which has been gift and meme to death at this point. What is your reaction to Joe Kelly and all of the suspension that came along with it?
I thought it was great. I thought it was a fantastic move. I was worried that the Astros were going to get away with this and nobody was going to say anything because so much time had eventually passed. And, I don't think he actually should have been suspended 8 games. I thought that was a little overblown for making a face at a player. Like, are they? Mm-hmm. I don't understand. Well, or I guess obviously throw him behind the guy, but 8 games for that seems a little excessive, especially in a 60-game season where Joe Kelly is an important bullpen arm for the Dodgers. But I did think it was a great stuff. I think that the Astros are just going to have to endure some of this. They were caught, and that's just what's going to happen. And obviously, the Dodgers are still very bitter about the situation, costing them a World Series.
Yeah, and I know Kelly wasn't there at the time, but you got to figure that just being around those guys who probably talking a lot about it, maybe that was just his way of sort of getting in the good graces of his teammates. I don't know. It even is possible that he did just miss. It seems unlikely. His accuracy was off, but I mean, I don't know. I think especially that one that almost hit Bregman, that looked like it was intentional. But again, I don't know. I do find it interesting. Also, I'm not surprised. Like, I'm not surprised that MLB came down way hard on Kelly for this because they don't want people to be aiming at the Astros' heads every game, and they don't want people to think it's okay, so they have to come down hard. That's the reality of the situation. I mean, the MLB really just screwed up with not stripping them of their title. I think the Astros.
Well, what do you do at that point? Do you award the Dodgers the title or just say the 2017 World Series is vacant?
Yeah, vacant.
I still think that's a little weird for me. I don't know.
It's weird, but I think that I think it's a way that you can punish them without actually having to suspend them. And obviously, they don't want to suspend them because of the money thing, which I get because the Astros are a huge draw. But I think that this way you can also sort of say no, we punished them, and literally all you do is say 2017 title vacated. They still even keep the trophy or the piece of metal. They keep the obviously they keep the rings because the owner paid for them. But I just think that that's an easy fix to punish the players without actually having to lose money by doing it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I just think, there was a no-win situation no matter what the MLB did. I don't think
Mhm.
it was going to be enough for people unless they, suspended Altuve, Bregman, Springer, some of these other guys.
Yeah, for life. I mean, other than that, people were going to be
Yeah.
calling down. Yeah, but okay. Enough about general sports. We'll get into the what you all came here to see, the uh, rankings. And Kyle, why don't you set up first your scoring system, and then how this usually works.
Yeah, so once again, I'm going to rank the divisions. I've ranked them all. I made a slight change already to my division rankings based on some news in the NFL. We'll get to
Okay.
that on a future podcast because it didn't affect this one because this is still the sixth best division in the NFL for me. And I have that because I think that once again, this is the second division of three that I have with no Super Bowl contenders. And they also have a first round pick potential team. But I think that the one thing too, when it comes to the no Super Bowl contenders, where I listed the NFC East as no Super Bowl contenders, but I had the Cowboys and Eagles as potential playoff teams. Obviously, one of those teams has to win a division. I feel like at least with the Cowboys and Eagles, they have a higher ceiling. I feel like than these three teams that I all listed as potential playoff teams. I'm not really in love with any of these teams and saying they're going to make a deep run. I feel like one of these teams I have as a huge regression candidate, and I'm just not in love with any of these teams besides Deshaun Watson. So that's why I have it as the sixth best division in football.
Okay, interesting. Because I actually feel like two of these teams, and obviously we'll get into it a little bit later. I think two of these teams, I think have very high ceilings if everything goes right. Although they have a lot of question marks, or at least some question marks. But let's just get into it. Who do you have as the number 4 team? It's kind of an obvious one here, but
Yeah.
who's going to get last in the AFC South?
Yeah, I think that this is an obvious one. I think this is a prime team to pick for, as a potential team to get the number one overall pick. And as a coach that's seemingly on the outs, a team with a lot more questions than answers in my mind. I think that you look at this team and you look at certain positions, and you're like, wow, there's a lot of talent here. I think the question for me is not only you know, the rest of the roster is lacking in a lot of talent, but the other thing is too, the talented players, how long are they going to be on this team, especially with all the offseason rumors going around? So that's the Jacksonville Jaguars. You probably all caught on to it. I have them as the fourth best team in the division because there's so much uncertainty with a lot of their top end talent. And I just think the roster is weaker than a lot of these teams overall.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is an obvious pick. I'm assuming that when you're figuring out how you're going to rank them, you just went, okay, Jaguars here. Now let's figure out the other three because they're an obvious one. I think that they have talent, but I think this is clearly a rebuilding year. And I think this would have been a good move to just go to a new coach at this point. They decided to not do that. We'll start with coach Doug Marrone. He gets a 1. He finished in the bottom 3 of my coach rankings. And Minshew, he gets a 5. He was right in the middle of those quarterback rankings. I think Minshew, very young, but had a really good rookie season. I think there's a chance this is the last year he plays for Jacksonville as a starter, just because they might end up being so bad. They go with, a Trevor Lawrence or one of the top end quarterbacks in the draft. But I think he's really talented. I really like Minshew, and I'll even go to the offensive line here and then get your thoughts. For their offensive line, you have Brandon Linder, who's a really good center. Andrew Norwell, who was an All-Pro with Carolina, but has been actively bad with Jacksonville. They also have A.J. Cann, who is also very bad. Jawan Taylor had a really good rookie year last year. He fell in the draft further than people thought, but ended up playing pretty well as a rookie, and I think he can continue to improve. And Cam Robinson, their other tackle, he's not great, but not a mess either. The guard play is really what holds this offensive line back, so they get a 3. So to recap, Marrone a 1, Minshew a 5, and the offensive line a 3. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the theme of this Jaguar season is going to kind of be what do we have at Minshew? They're going to find out, excuse me, they're going to find out exactly what his ceiling is, because I think the problem that the Jaguars are in right now is this is not really a season where you want to be on questioning your quarterback, because there are 3, in my mind, 3 really good quarterback prospects coming into this next season if they all come out for the draft, which I'm expecting. Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, and Trey Lance will all come out for the draft. Those are 3, I think, really high-end prospects compared to some of the years past that I think could all go in the top 5. So I that's the issue I have with Minshew, especially with the Jaguars. Now, earlier in the year, we had the little debate podcast, and I said I'd rather have Daniel Jones over Gardner Minshew just based on a number of variables. But I do think there are a lot of positives out of Minshew's performance. I did think that he's really good at moving in the pocket and waiting for receivers to get open. I think he's really good at that. But there are some things that I have questions about. I do think his arm strength issues are a little overblown. But I think at the same time, when you're a guy who doesn't have the strongest arm in the league, you have to be a little more accurate. He barely completed 60% of his passes. And I'm going to go a little next gen on you here, next gen NFL stats. His expected completion percentage, which compiles all of his throws last year and where he was throwing, who he was throwing to, and how open they were, gives an expected completion percentage was 65.8. And so his net difference between his actual completion percentage and expected completion percentage was minus 5.2%, which is the second worst in the league behind David Blah at Detroit. Sorry, I was getting there. So, I mean, I think that I think he is going to succeed eventually. I think he has some positives to his game. But if you're a quarterback who doesn't have huge arm strength, whether it's, you look at Chad Pennington, you look at Alex Smith, who did have success in this league, you have to be hyper accurate. So I think he's got to find better accuracy going forward, which I think he can. It's just, does he get that in these next couple of years before they take a new quarterback?
Yeah, you bring up some very real concerns, I think, about Minshew. And I also think that it should be mentioned that just because Minshew played a lot better in that offense than Foles did, part of that was because Minshew's, can run around in the pocket. And when their offense, the weak spot is their offensive line, and they need someone who can run around in the pocket. I think that's partially why you saw an improvement. That being said, he's a young guy, 6th-round rookie who is, played a lot better than most rookies play in their rookie season. So I think that he can, it'll be interesting to see how he goes for the rest of his career. I like him, but we'll go on to the wide receivers. They have BJ Chark, who I made a video on a couple of weeks ago. He has the tools to be number one receiver. His biggest thing standing in his way it seems to be sometimes just laziness, and he's not the best route runner. D.D. Westbrook and Chris Conley are also two guys. Conley had 775 yards last year. They also drafted a receiver in the 2nd round. I think this wide receiving group, I struggle with it because I feel like they have a lot of guys with talent, but I just feel like if they all achieved their full potential, this could be a great receiving core. But I've yet to see them all achieve their true potential. I'm going to give this a 4 right now. The 4 for a 4, that's kind of my big question mark. A 4 could still end up being an 8 by the end of the year. But I think it also could end up being lower than that, which is why I kind of have it. I think right now it's slightly below average.
Yeah, I mean, I like Chark, but I feel the same way kind of as you with some of the issues that he has. The one player I think that is to keep an eye on with this receiving core that could make it really good is going to be Laviska Shenault for me. He was the draft pick out of Colorado. I thought, this wide receiving draft was extremely deep, and that's why there's a lot of good receivers I think taken 2nd, 3rd, or 4th round. But he was one of the guys that I thought should have been a 1st rounder or a fringe 1st rounder because I think he can evolve into that number 1 guy. He put up pretty good numbers with a bad quarterback at Colorado and a really bad rest of the roster at Colorado and a good division in the Pac-12. And he put up good numbers despite everybody around him. I do think he's a guy that could turn into a number 1 receiver at the NFL level. But obviously that's, I'm not going to put that on him as a rookie receiver, but I think he's going to be solid as potentially a 3 or a 4 guy as he maybe takes one of the spots of a Westbrook or a Conley.
Yeah. And again, like I said, a lot of potential on the wide receivers, but I can't give everyone a 10. Got to find stuff here. For the backs, Leonard Fournette, he's, Leonard Fournette is the total running back who gets 2 yards for every carry and then breaks 1 and gets 70 yards a game. That's seemingly how he runs. You also have Chris Thompson as a backup. I struggle sometimes to evaluate Fournette because sometimes his highlights look great, and I do think that part of his problems are the offensive line. But at the same time, I'm still going to give this position grouping a 4. Again, I think it's slightly below average. You also have the tight ends. You have Tyler Eifert, who they brought in, who he's typically great for 5 games a year. He cannot stay healthy. But I think that there's a question mark. If this is the 1 year he stays healthy, could be a lot better. They also have Josh Oliver, who was a 2019 third rounder, but he was hurt for most of 2019. So again, question mark there. With all these question mark things, I'm going to give them 4s for both backs and tight ends, which is now going to put their offense at, conveniently enough, a 4.0, which is the third worst offense so far in the NFL out of the 20 teams we've gone over.
Yeah, Fournette's a really interesting one because he finally, for his first time in his career, hit over 4 yards a carry last year. I think if you look at Fournette, like you said, if you look at Fournette on film, he looks like a guy who should be an 8 or a 9 on his own because he's so big, he's so powerful, he has great speed to go along with it, and he's actually, I think, a really good receiver out of the backfield too. I think that's kind of underrated in his game, but it's putting together the whole package for a full season. I thought he actually had a solid year last year, but there wasn't a lot going right for Jacksonville. And they brought in Chris Thompson to take off some of the receiving pressure. But I'm kind of with you that I think I'm leaning more towards that it's more of the offensive line's fault than necessarily just Fournette's fault. I don't think he's, I think he's partially responsible, but I think a lot of it is his offensive line. And I feel like if it were a change of scenery for him, I feel like he'd put up big numbers. But for where he's at in Jacksonville right now, I don't think he's been very good.
Yeah, and I also think, again, there's a lot of good halfbacks. So, the 4s feel lower than they actually, there'll be great halfbacks that are getting 7s just because of how many good halfbacks there are right now. We'll move on to the defense. First, we'll go with edge rushers. This is an easy 10. I would have given it an 11 if I could. You have Josh Allen, who was, breakout rookie last year, led rookies in sacks, despite there being a couple of really good, rookie edge rushers. Obviously, Nick Bosa and Max Crosby being a couple of them. That they still have Unique Ngakoue on the roster as of today, and also K'Lavon Chaisson, who was a first-round pick. If he's your third guy, that's definitely something special. That's an easy 10 for me. For the interior defensive line, you have R.B. Jones, who was great in 2016, but kind of hasn't done much since. You have Taven Bryan, who is good. You have Al Woods, who's coming off of a good year, but is 33 from coming over from Seattle. And they also have a third-round pick, Hamilton, who they just drafted. Again, this is the big question mark for me. A lot of guys, they have plenty of guys who could end up being fine, could end up not being great. I'm giving the interior defensive line a 5, and then their edge gets 10, so 15 out of 20 overall for the D-line.
Yeah, I believe, didn't Al Woods opt out? I thought he did.
Oh, did he? He might have. I haven't.
Yes, he did.
Okay.
Yeah, gotcha. I've been trying to. Yeah, Al Woods did opt out, but
well, that doesn't really change my.
Yeah.
But yeah, I appreciate bringing that up.
But I do think the edge rushers are very good here. I guess, I don't think it's a big issue, but I guess the one question you have for a guy like Josh Allen, which is if and when, it seems more like when rather than if Yannick Ngakoue is traded for the Jaguars, is Allen still as productive without them putting so much attention on Ngakoue? So yeah, I think Josh Allen is going to be fine even if Yannick Ngakoue does get traded. But I guess that's the one question you have. And then Chaisson is another player who I think was a solid pick out of the draft, but he only had one really good year at LSU. So you have questions about how legitimate does it hold up throughout the season. But I think this is a good edge rushing group overall, and I'm a big fan. I actually like Taven Bryan. It sounds like a little more than you. I think he can be a really good defensive tackle. But I think it's a solid group overall.
Yeah, agreed. And then we'll go on to the last part of the defense. We'll go to linebackers and secondary. Linebackers, you have Miles Jack, Joe Schobert, and then you also have Quincy Williams, who was a third-round pick in 2019, although did not have a good rookie year. But, just Jack and Schobert alone, really good 1-2 punch. They get a 9 out of 10 for linebackers, I think. And then we'll go on to the secondary. You have C.J. Henderson, who I loved out of the draft. I think he's really good. You also have Trey Herndon, who is, I think is good as well. He had an opposing passer rating of just 79.0, which is great. And I love him as a number 2 guy. If Henderson can beat at number 1 guy, Herndon number 2, I think that's a great 1-2 combo for corners. For safeties, you have Ronnie Harrison, who, I like him. I think that he's a replacement level. He's sort of like your average starter, but he has room to get better. So I could see him continuing to improve. Gerard Wilson, I think, is really just a depth guy. I don't think he should be starting. I think I'm going to give the secondary a 4. I think, a lot of it does turn into, Henderson's a rookie. Rookie cornerbacks tend to not do too well. I'm not going to expect too much from him. And it seems like for the secondary to be an above average secondary, they would need a rookie corner to be a number 1 corner, which, other than Lattimore, I can't think of a time it's happened in recent memory. I'm sure there's times and I'm just forgetting, but I think that this is a 4. Again, a lot of potential, but chances are it's going to end up being below average, I think. So 9 for linebackers, 4 for secondary. That gives their defense 5.6 and their overall team a 4.9.
Yeah, I mean, I question the Joe Sherbert signing for what he got paid a little bit, but at the same time, the benefit to it was you get to move Miles Jack out of that middle linebacker spot where it clearly he wasn't as effective as the outside linebacker spot he was the years before. So that is a benefit, and I think Sherbert has a good game, and obviously he's been a good linebacker for a number of years with the Browns. I also like Shaquille Quarterman as depth. I think he was really good out of Miami and a little underrated in the draft. The secondary, I think, is also really solid. I think DJ Hayden, too, as a good third cornerback is also pretty good. And like you said, Ronnie Harrison's a solid safety at the back, too. I think that's a good group overall.
Yes. Okay. So, so that means Jacksonville Jaguars, third worst team so far out of the 20 we've talked about. The only team's worse in terms of the grading scale, and that doesn't necessarily mean who's actually going to be worse, would be the Panthers and then the football team are the 2 teams that finish with lower grades. So let's move on from Jacksonville. Now this is where I think things get interesting. Who do you have as the team that's going to finish third in the AFC South?
Yeah, so I mean, I felt pretty confident on the one team that I have winning the division. These 2 teams, I felt like I was splitting a lot of hairs going between the 2, and I feel like we are going to disagree here on this one. I was going back and forth on these 2 teams, and in the end, I said tie goes to the quarterback. So I'm going to go with a third team. I'm going with the Tennessee Titans, who I think are going to regress a little bit this next season. They lost a few players off that team that were really effective last year, so I'm going to go with Tennessee Titans at the third best team in the division.
This is a wild take, I think, that Tennessee Titans third in the division. Spoiler alert right out of the way, they had the highest grade that I had in the division. I think this is the favorite to win the division. So this is interesting. But I guess I'll just get into my rankings, and then you can we'll sort of get into why you feel this way as I do that. We'll start off with the head coach. Your guy, Mike Vrabel, he gets a 5. He was in the middle of the pack in my rankings. And then for quarterbacks, Ryan Tannehill got a 7. However, I am dropping them 1 point because I don't love their backup situation. Looks like right now Cole McDonald is the number 2 guy. He was a 7th round pick. I don't love that. I think that a 7th round rookie. Yes, I know we just talked a bunch about how much we love Gardner Minshew, but that's concerning to me. So I am going to drop them a point. I think this is a team that could be in trouble if they lose Tannehill, but still get a 6 for the quarterback room and 5 for the coach.
So I'm a big fan of Vrabel. I like that he takes a lot of risk. I think that he's a good football coach. The Tannehill one is, I think he's good for the system that they have. And obviously, if the running game's working, I think Tannehill is going to be just fine. The question is this legitimate for me? Because I feel like, the number of times quarterbacks have had career years at 31 or, years that are significantly better than the rest of their career at 31, I think is slim. And I don't know how legitimate it is that that's going to hold up. So that's my biggest issue starting out of the gate with Tennessee is I feel like I have a lot of questions with that and how they're going to hold up with Tannehill at quarterback. And he's going to be the same level he was last year at not turning over the ball at all and completing 70% of his passes.
Yeah, I disagree. I think that I don't think Tannehill showed me anything with Tennessee that he hadn't shown me with Miami. I just think that we now finally saw a team that really used his strengths to their benefit, and they weren't having him trying to be someone who he's not, which Miami often did.
So my biggest thing, so one of the reasons that I listed Tennessee is probably my team to regress this season, which they were 9-7 last year. So it's not like I'm saying a huge regression. I can see this team as like a 7-9, 8-8 team, or even a 9-7 team and just missing the playoffs because the other two teams are ahead of them. But I feel like a lot of it is because I don't think Derrick Henry is going to lead the league in rushing next year. So if Derrick Henry is not the best running back in the league next year and is maybe like the 8th or 9th best back in the league next year, is he still going to be able to have the same sort of success that he had last season when people aren't as worried as Henry as they were last year?
Yes.
All right, I disagree on that, but we can agree to disagree on that one. We'll see with Tannehill. I still have a lot of questions about his game, if that can hold up long term.
Okay, well, you're allowed to have your wrong opinion if that's what you want. We'll go on to the offensive line now. Offensive line, we have Ben Jones, who was he's a center, been solid for a while, but had a breakout 2019 season. We'll see if that continues. Roger Saffold, who is also great. You have Nate. This is guards. You have Nate Diaz, not Nate Diaz. That'd be interesting. Nate Davis, who is a 3rd-round pick in 2019. He was a mess as a rookie for a large part of it, but he did play well from week 14 on, so maybe that continues. He had a really good playoffs, I thought, really stepped up then, so maybe we'll see more of that. Taylor Lewan is a monster, but then the question is, they lost Jack Conklin. They drafted Isaiah Wilson in the 1st round. Will he be able to make up for the loss of Conklin? I like this line. I liked it better last year with Conklin, but I still like it. This is a 7 offensive line for me.
I think it's solid. I think it's kind of mid-tier for me. I think I think it's a good offensive line overall, but I do question what's going to happen with Conklin. I thought for a long stretch of the season, Lewan was up there as well, but I thought he was their best offensive lineman for a lot of the year overall. And losing a player like that, I think, is going to be tough. But I think it's still going to be a solid offensive line overall.
Yeah, you have an argument doing it. I think Lewan was I think Lewan was much better in pass protection, but I think Conklin might have been the better run. I think Conklin was the better run blocking guy. So they definitely, it's definitely a loss. I still think this is a really good line, and they did have a 1st-round pick to replace it. So they have put resources into trying to fix that hole. The question is just rookies are always question marks, so that's why they lose a couple points. Wide receivers, I like this wide receiving core. I'm not crazy about it, but I like it. A.J. Brown, I think, had a great rookie season. He probably should have been more in the Rookie of the Year talks than he was. Corey Davis has definitely not lived up to the hype of being a 5th overall pick. I question if he can be a true number 2 guy from time to time. I do like Humphreys as a slot guy. I think Humphreys is a very good slot guy. I'm giving this wide receiving core a 6, and it could be a lot better if Davis can be that number 2 guy.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is A.J. Brown's, this is as far as A.J. Brown's willing to take this group. I think he does a lot of things really well. He's able to run. He runs a great deep route. He does a lot of things that, he's perfect for the play action game and what Tannehill wants to do. And I think that's a big thing for what they're trying to do. I think Humphreys is also really successful in that role. But yeah, I feel like it's kind of too deep, and then that's just about it for me right now. That's my issue with the Tennessee receivers.
Yeah, I'm just, again, if Davis ever wants to just be a number 2 guy, I'm sure Tennessee would love it, but hasn't happened yet. For the backs, you have Derrick Henry, who is, I would say, the best pure running back. If you take out the passing game, best pure runner in the NFL last year. You also have Danton Evans, who was a 3rd-round pick. They just drafted him. So getting another guy who could potentially I think be a backup, where they've kind of struggled with having that number 2 guy. I think they've now fixed that. I think this is a 10 for me.
Yeah, I think it's a 10 for now. I think Henry is one of the elite level running backs. Now, like I said, I do think that he sort of regresses this year. I don't think he's going to lead the league in rushing next year, but that doesn't take away that he's still a really good running back. I still think he probably finishes top 6 in rushing, top 7 in rushing. But that was my question with this offense: is how does it hold up if they don't have the best running back in the league at the time?
Why do you feel he's going to have regression? Is it the loss of Conklin?
I do think that's a part of it. And also I feel like, you've actually alluded to it a few times. The first half of the year, he wasn't really that great. I think he was solid, but not great. And then he really just blew up the last essentially when Tannehill came in the last 12 games of the year, maybe 10 games of the year for him. And that's when they obviously went on their run. They won the majority of their games the second half of the year because he was able to turn it on that second half. Now, is he the first half of the year player? Is he the second half of the year player? Is he somewhere in the middle is the question for me. I don't think he's as bad as he was in the first half of the year, but I don't think he's going to be as consistently as good as he was in the second half of the year.
Yeah, you're probably right. I could actually see him having a very similar statistical season, but just it being a lot more even over the stretch instead of just how lopsided it was. But yeah, we'll go on to tight ends now. Jonnu Smith, amazing receiver, not as amazing as a blocker, but also not a black hole as a blocker. Anthony Ferkster is more of an all-around guy, but still better as a receiver. These are two tight ends you can throw the ball to. Again, I'm not sure if they have a fantastic blocker in the mix, but I'm still giving this a 7 here for their tight end grouping.
I think the blocking is where I maybe graded a little low, maybe closer to a 6 because of that. But I do think that there are some good things about this team. Like you said, they love to run that play action, and then those guys are really good at catching the ball. I think Ferkster is a guy that can be pretty good here. His numbers don't blow you away, but I think that he is a good receiving tight end, and I think he could have a better year next year.
Well, I don't think they're going to need their blocking because of how good their line is. A 7 out of 10 offensive line. They don't need good blocking tight ends.
Well, if I think the right tackle is going to get worse, then I think that's a big thing that they're going to have to.
No, Isaiah Wilson. You hear it right now. Rookie of the year, right tackle Isaiah Wilson, because that's a position that often wins Rookie of the Year.
I will gladly bet you that Isaiah Wilson is not even going to be the best rookie tackle next year. Never mind.
No, maybe just MVP. I think Isaiah Wilson MVP next year. All right, I'm put $10 down to win $1 million at Vegas. The Isaiah Wilson MVP of 2020. We'll move on. So their offense, I gave them a 7.2. I believe you would have given them a 0.0. But we'll move on to the defense here. Wow. We'll move on to the defense. The edge rushers, you have Vic Beasley, who they brought in. Question marks on him. And then Harold Landry, he's good. He had a 6 sack season last year. Beasley, I believe, still had 8 sacks last year. I'm going to give this edge grouping a 6. I think it's slightly above average, but just slightly. I'm closer to a 5 than a 7 for sure. And then for the interior defensive line, you have Jeffrey Simmons, who was a 2019 first rounder, but he was injured for most of last year, so we'll see what he can do. Daquan Jones, I think, is a really good nose, but I think that Isaiah Mack is really more of a depth guy, and I think this is I think that this is I'm going to give this a 5.
Yeah, I do think that this is another position that I think that they got worse in that I think is a big problem. I think you said there's some questions with Vic Beasley. I think there's a lot more. I think he's just not very good. I think his 8 sacks were kind of the most fake stat I think I've ever seen in terms of overall production for an edge rusher. So I feel like I also reserve the right to change this if they sign Jadeveon Clowney, because I think this is the perfect Clowney team. Because he makes up exactly for what I don't think Vic Beasley is very good at, because I don't think there's a lot of pass rushing here if they don't get a guy like Clowney or somebody to replace Beasley overall, because I think Landry's solid, but I think Landry's kind of guy who needs a strong rusher on his opposite side to be successful. And I just don't think Beasley is going to be that guy for them.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is losing Casey here. It didn't make a lot of that whole thing that made no sense to me. I think it's for the entire defensive line. The Clowney thing would make sense, but I don't know why they would have given Beasley that money if they were planning on giving money to Clowney, unless they're going to give him like a cheap 1-year prove-it deal. This probably the weak spot of this team is the D line, I would say. And we'll move on to the linebackers. You have Jaylen Brown and Rashaan Evans, 2 guys who I think are really good. I'm going to give this a 9 out of 10. And then we'll go on to the secondary. I think that Adoree Jackson is a true number 1 guy. I think that Malcolm Butler, he hasn't necessarily lived up to the contract, but I think that he is a number 2 guy. And they also have Jonathan Joseph, who I think would be a number 2 guy in most teams. And then they have Kristen Fulton, 2nd round pick in 2020. Then you have for safeties, for some reason I wrote F instead of S for my safety on my list. But you have Kevin Byard, who is fantastic. And then Kenny Vaccaro, who is probably the weak spot of the secondary, but he's still an above replacement level player, in my opinion. I think the secondary is good. I think it's a tough secondary to throw on. I think part of why it was not the best last year was just it got very injured. And I think with it staying healthy this year, I think this is a 10 out of 10 secondary.
Yeah, I think he wrote F instead of S because he meant free safety is what makes this team. I think Kevin Byard's a fantastic player at safety. I think the middle of this defense is a strength with Brown, Evans, and then, of course, Byard at the back. That's a really good group. I think Jonathan Joseph replaces Malcolm Butler sometime during this season. I don't think Butler's very good overall, and I think that he's kind of regressed over multiple years since he had that play for New England to win the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. I think Adoree Jackson's obviously very good. He's legit, but I think that second cornerback spot's going to be interesting. If it is Joseph, how does his legs hold up? He's not getting any younger. If it is Butler, can he play better back to some of his previous form that he had with New England? Because I don't think he's been that great the last few seasons.
Yeah, but I still think though that if Butler's number 3 guy, I think that's great. Again, separate the contract just from how he's playing. I think it's fine. Defense, I give it a 7.5, meaning that their total score is 7.1. So I'll say why I think the Titans are going to be. I think they have a good chance to. They're probably my pick to win the division. I just think that you looked at last year, and I think you saw how much better Tannehill was. I think this is a better team. If Tannehill starts all 16 games, I think they win more than 9 games. I think the line is still good. To have future MVP Isaiah Wilson. So I think he will lead them to being a very good offensive line. I still think the running game is going to be good. I think they have enough weapons where to play action and just passing in general. I think it's been a bit overhyped that like all Ryan Tannehill can do is throw from play action. He's had plenty of good throws. Not in play action. Their defense is a bit inconsistent, but I think the back end is good enough that I still think this is a good team, and I think that it's a bit of a weaker division in terms of top end talent. I think this Tennessee team is a good team.
Yeah, I mean, this is the one prediction where I could probably eat it the most because I did think that this is probably the one where I'm the most out there. I just don't think they were 7-3 the second half of the season, and then obviously won their 2 playoff games that everybody talked about, but I also feel like that's a team that their ceiling, I think, is 10-6, maybe 9-7. Whereas I'm more comfortable saying that this team could be 8-8 or 7-9 next year, because I do think that the other 2 teams have more upside than them. I think that the Colts and Texans, at the end of the day, will have more upside, and I think that they will be better than them. But yeah, I mean, once again, we'll agree to disagree on Tannehill. I think that it's going to be kind of a wait and see. I think if I just look at a guy's body of work, I'm going to lean towards more of the body that says he's not this good of a quarterback rather than the year that he had the good season.
Okay. Yeah. Again, agree to disagree, I guess. We'll go on to so you have the Colts or the Texans winning this division. Very interesting stuff here. Who do you have that is not going to win the division? Who is going to come up just short and be the number 2 team?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a team that, people will probably say had the worst offseason in the league, but I still think that there's a lot of solid pieces on this team. Plus, if this team makes the playoffs at a potential 10-6 season, I think Deshaun Watson's the MVP. I'm going to go with Deshaun Watson and the Houston Texans for number 2.
Wow. Okay. Great. So Colts winning the division. This is interesting. When you said, I think this team had the worst offseason in the league, I was thinking Indianapolis wasn't that bad. Okay. Right. Houston. But I did not see this coming at all, Kyle. This is interesting. Yeah, I think Houston is my biggest boom or bust team that we've talked about so far. I think this is a team that could do. I think this team could do very well. I could easily see this team winning 6 games, even with a really good quarterback. We'll start with the guy who universally loved, Bill O'Brien. He gets a 5. Again, we're just talking about coaching, not GM. He gets a 5, middle of the pack coach dude. And then we have for quarterbacks, Deshaun Watson. He gets an 8. So 5 and 8 for the 2 most important spots.
Yeah, I think that's fair. You could even talk me into a 6 sometimes with Bill O'Brien. I think he is a smart coach. He wins this division seemingly every year for a reason. Despite his GM record, I do think that he does a good job with that offense. I would love to see him open it up a little more for Watson and take a few more risks. I feel like I remember this offense being a lot more open when he was with Brady in New England. And I feel like it's time to let that happen with Watson, because I think Watson is probably a top 6 or 7 quarterback in the league now. I think, well, not probably. He's firmly in that group, I think, for me. And I think that he could have a big year this next season.
Yeah, I mean, again, not too many. There's, I don't have too many bad things to say about Watson. I gave him the 7th ranking on my quarterback rankings, which is just, one spot below being a 9 out of 10. He's great. Excuse me. I really like Watson a lot. Let's talk about the biggest false narrative about Houston is that they have a terrible offensive line. This offensive line is most underrated line in the league. You have Nick Martin, who was not very good his first 2 seasons, and then he was given a big extension, and you did see a slight upgrade last year, so we'll see if that continues. You have Max Sharpling, who was a second-round pick last year and looked promising. Zach Fulton, he's fine. He's a good pass blocker, but he's not the best in run, which is important for a guard. And then you also have Clemente, who he's sort of a really good 6-man. He can play all 5 positions, so he's someone that's valuable on the team. Put him in the guard spot because that's kind of naturally where he is. And the best thing about this line is their tackle situation. I think Titus Howard is really good, had a really good rookie season last year. And, of course, Laramie Tunsil, they gave up 2 first-round picks to get him, and for a good reason. He's very good. I like their tackles, and I think that they don't really have a mess at any of the other positions. So I think this is a good offensive line. I'm giving them a 7.
Yeah, I think that people like to talk about that this offensive line is as patchy as the Seattle Seahawks or, your much beleaguered mustache. They like to talk about it that way.
How dare you?
I think that this is a good offensive line. I do go through, and I've talked about it a couple times on the podcast here. I rank some of the top players I think that are in the division. Laramie Tunsil is second for me in the division. I think he's the second best player in the division overall. He's a legit left tackle. And did they overpay for him and Kenny Stills? Probably. I think that's going to be kind of my theme with the Texans. Did they overpay for blank? Did they overpay for Laramie Tunsil and Kenny Stills? Probably. But is Laramie Tunsil still really good at football? Yeah, absolutely he is. I think he's that good of a left tackle, and he's really anchored this offensive line.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's kind of the thing. It's like you can make bad decisions and still be a good football team. Like, it's not like every decision is going to completely make or break you. So, yeah, I think that this line is good. We'll go on to the receivers. They happen to lose somebody that I think is definitely hurt their receiving core a little bit. You might have heard about that. We'll also talk, but they did add Brandon Cooks, who I think is good. I think he's kind of like that. If you're better than Brandon Cooks, you're number 1. If you're worse than Brandon Cooks, you're number 2, and he's like right in the middle. You have Will Fuller, who again, he's another guy. He'll be great for 5 games. The problem is he can't stay healthy. Randall Cobb was good for Dallas last year, and Kenny Stills was good for Houston last year. I think they could use a true number 1 guy, and I worry about Fuller's ability to stay healthy. So I'm giving them a 6 here. But again, if Fuller can stay healthy, I think it goes up a couple spots.
Yeah, I do think that, kind of like you said, I think Cooks is that fringe 1 or 2 guy. I think the interesting thing about this receiving group is that, Cobb had his best year in 5 years. I think Stills can be pretty good. I think Fuller's good. I think Cooks is good. I think that they're 4 deep right there. 4 deep receivers, but like you said, they're kind of lacking that top guy, which, would have been DeAndre Hopkins, but that's, DeAndre Hopkins isn't there, so they're just going to have to deal with that. I still think that this is a pretty good group of receivers overall, though. I would probably put it at a 5 or a 6 because they are missing that number 1 guy, but still, it's a lot of options for Watson to go with.
Yeah, agreed. We'll go on to backs. They got David Johnson, and they also have Duke Johnson. I think 2 guys of potential, but I'm still putting this as kind of a question mark situation. I'm giving them a 4. And then for tight ends, you have Darren Fells, who's a good red zone guy, had 7 touchdowns last year and is also a good blocker. And you also have Jordan Atkins, good receiving tight end. I'm giving them a 6. So 4 for backs, 6 for tight end group.
Yeah, my question is, does this team not plan on running the ball at all? Because I actually think that they could be a very good running back group for catching the ball out of the backfield. I think Duke Johnson's been good at that. And I think I do think that's part of David Johnson's game that's still kind of held up, even though his running game has kind of regressed. And I think they have two tight ends who aren't the greatest blockers, but are good at catching the ball as well. Jordan Akins, UCF, go Knights. But yeah, I mean, so I feel like that this is a good group for throwing the ball out of the backfield. I think that's throwing the ball just in general. I think it's a good receiving tight end group and a good receiving running back group. My question is, who do they plan on running the ball? And who do they plan on blocking for them?
Right. I think even their line is built around, with the tackles being the best part of it, it's sort of more built around pass protection than run protection. So, I mean, the running game is going to be it could be a problem. Offense as a whole gets a 6.2. Let's move on to the defense. The defense, we'll start with the edge rushers. JJ Watt is 31, coming off of yet another injury. So definitely some question marks there. But at the same time, last time 2 years ago, he had 16 sacks. So, listen, he's one of those guys you can never really count out, but he is still technically human. So it's looking rough. You also have Whitney Merciless, who is very good. And then Brandon Scarlett, who I like as number 3, not really number 2. So I think a lot is going to, hinder on if JJ Watt can stay healthy, which is a big if. So I'm giving them a 6 for edge rushers. And then moving on to the defensive line, I think the loss of DJ Reader hurts them a lot. They drafted Ross Blacklock in the second round of the most recent draft. Brandon Dunn is fine, but he's not a number 1 guy. They also have Omehu, who was a 5th round rookie last year. He showed some flashes, and he's versatile, can play defensive tackle or defensive end. And then Angelo Blackson, who is, I think, a little bit better than a depth guy, but nothing fantastic. I worry about this interior defensive line. I'm not sure who's going to replace DJ Reader. I don't think anyone will. I think this is a 3 for interior defensive line and a 6 for edge rushers.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest problem that's happened with Houston over the last couple of years, it hasn't even been, to me, the trades. I think the biggest issue is that they've lost 2 very good defensive linemen in Clowney and in DJ Reader and haven't really replaced them. I think that's a big problem for this defense. Now, like you said, I think that a lot of this defense has been, if JJ Watt's healthy, this defense is pretty solid. If he's not healthy, then it struggles a little bit more sometimes. But I think if he stays healthy, this is going to be a good group. I also like Jonathan Grenard, too. When I saw him coming up out of Florida, he kind of reminded me of Whitney Merciless, and now they're on the same team. So that could be an interesting group. And then, we'll see if Blacklock's ready to take on that defensive tackle role. I think that's going to be the big thing with this team because they don't have a replacement for DJ Reader right now, and that's going to be a problem.
Yeah. Moving on to the linebackers, this is the best part of their defense, I think. Unless Watt stays healthy, then maybe edge rushers. But you have McKinney and Cunningham, 2 really good linebackers who both 6'4". So trying to run play action and throw over them is not easy to do, which is very good when you have a team like Tennessee who runs a lot of play action. That height really comes into play. They also drafted Jonathan Greenland in the 3rd round of the 2020 draft. I like this linebacking core. I'm giving them a 9. Moving on to secondary, Bradley Roby I think is good, but I prefer him as a number 2. I think he can play 1, but I think he's, obviously he was the number 3 guy for Denver when they in 2015 when they won a Super Bowl. I don't love him as a number 1 guy, but I think he can do it. Garyon Conley, I like Garyon Conley. I didn't really get this trade from Oakland. I think he's good. And then you also have for the starting safeties, you have Justin Reed, who I think is very good. Jalen Watkins, who is the lesser-known Watkins brother of Sammy Watkins. But I don't think he should be starting. I think he's more of a depth/special teams guy who just is kind of forced to be starting. I also think the biggest problem with this secondary is depth right now, especially when it comes to a 3rd corner. We saw teams last year, put 4 receivers out there, and Houston couldn't cover them all. They kind of tried to replace this. They got Vernon Hargreaves midway through last season. That's not good because Hargreaves isn't good. They also drafted John Reed in the 4th round of the 2020 draft. They have Lonnie Johnson Jr., who was bad his rookie year, but he was a 2nd round pick, so we'll see. But at the end of the day, I mean, I think that the depth for corners is a real problem. I think they need someone to step up and be at number 3, but I'm still giving their secondary a 5 because I like some of the other pieces they have.
Yeah, I do think that this is a secondary group that is kind of like if one of these guys kind of work out, it could be very good. Because
Hmm.
you mentioned Reed, you mentioned Johnson. If they kind of develop and work out, that's a good thing. I've kind of written off Vernon Hargreaves of ever being good, but
Yeah.
who knows? He could have a late bloom. He could be a
Nope.
late bloomer, but I don't think he's going to be good. Um,
There's a
I th-
there's a better chance Isaiah Wilson actually wins MVP than Vernon Hargraves turns into a decent corner.
Fair enough. I think Justin Reed is very good. I think that linebacking group is very good. But yeah, I think that I think you hit it right on the head with that one. I think that they're kind of hoping one corner works out, if maybe not, maybe two corners work out. Otherwise, it's just an okay group overall, or maybe even a bad group overall.
Yeah, and again, it's part of the way I look at these is like how our teams, like how will actually practically be, not just like me grading everyone in the group on 1 to 10 and then mixing that together. And I do think that we saw with I get not every team's Kansas City, but we saw Kansas City put a lot of receivers out there, have them go out, and you just can't, you're now going to have someone who's open on basically every play, and especially if neither Reed nor Johnson are able to pick it up and beat at number 3 guys. So that's a real concern. But again, that's why I say this is the boomer bust team, because things can go very wrong for Houston. Things can go very right for Houston. If Watt does stay healthy, if they get that number 3 corner, this goes from a bad defense to a great defense, and it could also very much go to a bad defense. So it's very up in the air. But right now they're getting a 5.8, giving a total score of 5.9, which isn't that great.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that a lot of this is going to be predicated on Watson being really good. And that's the reason why I picked him that high. I think this receiving core can be very good for him. Even without a clear-cut number 1 guy, I think that there's enough guys that can get open for him. But I do think that Watson can be the kind of guy that at an MVP that not only can hit an MVP level, and I think he could end up being the MVP this season, I think he can bring a lot of the team up with his MVP level play.
Yeah, I mean, no, I mean, I love Watson too, and I think that even though they have a lower grade than the Colts, I would still put Houston as my team second most likely to win the division, behind Tennessee. But let's get into the team that you said you had number 1, your Indianapolis Colts. I'm gonna get some water. You tell me why you think the Colts are the best, are going to win the division.
I just think that there's a lot of things that went really well for this team this offseason. I think that I think that they have the best offensive line in football. Not only that, on that offensive line, I think they have the best player in the division, who might be a top 10 player in football as well. And I thought they did a lot really well this offseason. I think they have got a lot of really nice pieces. The question is going to be that quarterback position still for them. I think that they have a complete roster minus quarterback, where you question Phillip Rivers. Now, the benefit to Phillip Rivers is he's going to be behind a much better offensive line this season. And I think behind a much better offensive line, he could be pretty good once again, if not, very good once again. And if not, the thing is I didn't hate Jacoby Brissett when he was healthy and his team was healthy last year. I think he's a solid backup behind Rivers that if he needs to step in and start, I think he can be a pretty solid team. If this team stays healthy, I think that they should win the division.
Okay, well, let's just get into it. Coach Frank Reich, he finished in that 5 spot, so he gets a 5. Quarterbacks, Rivers got a 4. I am raising them 1 point, though, because as you just said, Jacoby Brissett, and you kind of touched on that, so let's go straight to the offensive line. We have, for center, Ryan Kelly, who is great. We'll go to the tackles. I think Braden Smith is probably a top 15 tackle overall, and Anthony Costanzo is probably a top 10 tackle overall. So really good tackle play. The guards, Quentin Nelson, of course, we all know what he can do. The real problem with this line is Mike Lonowski, who is not very good. And with offensive line, sometimes you're only as best as your worst player. So that is a concern for me, and I'm going to drop them 2 whole points because of that concern and give them an 8, even though the rest of their line is so good. But again, if they can find a way to replace that guard position, they would see a huge jump.
Yeah, I'd still probably put it as a 9. I think these, I don't think it's just that these 4 are good. I think that these 4 are really great. And then, of course, Quentin Nelson, like I said, I rated him as the best player in the entire division. He's a big-time player for them. Everybody loves Quentin Nelson. A lot of his highlights get put on because he's a devastating blocker. But, I mean, yeah, I just think he's a big-time player, and I think this line's just really good.
Yeah, I need to start thinking about who I think the best player is. I need to do that the next time. That's fun. But we'll go into the wide receivers. You have T.Y. Hilton. I've recorded a video about him. I have not yet posted it yet, so be on the lookout for that one if you're listening to this. But yeah, I think T.Y. Hilton, did have a bit of a down year, even after, despite the injuries. His numbers were a little bit down. But I think a lot of that was just system and not having luck throwing to him. You have Michael Pittman. You have Paris Campbell, who was 2019 second rounder, who has potential. You have Zach Pascal, who has had moments of being a great playmaker, but is inconsistent. So a lot of guys with potential here. I'm going to give this a 5 because it is, again, a huge question mark. Could work out really well, could work out really poorly. We'll have to kind of wait and see.
Yeah, I think this is the biggest question mark for me for the offense of this team is going to be the receiver spot, but I think Hilton can have a bounce back year. Obviously, not having Andrew Luck is a big thing, especially when that was who was throwing to him his whole career. But I think that they have a bunch of young receivers that I think can be pretty good. I actually think Pascal has another good leap forward this next year and solidifies himself as the number 2 guy. So that's one of the reasons why I graded him so highly. And I like Michael Pittman a lot. He's a really big receiver, something that they kind of lacked. And I think he can have a good year too, even as a rookie.
Yeah, I agree. And for backs, you have Jonathan Taylor and Marlon Mack. I think this is above average. I'm not going to go crazy about a rookie until I see them play in the NFL. I'm going to give the backs a 6. And for tight ends, I think Jack Doyle is really good. And I also like the idea of having Trey Burton. I think he's a really good number 2 guy because he can, catch, and he's a good route runner. You also have Mo Alley Cox, who will get red zone snaps, I suspect. Good number 3 guy. Tight end group gets an 8 for me. The backs get a 6 for me.
Yeah, I think one of the things that makes up for this receiving group for me is that they have 2 really good receiving tight ends ready to go in Burton and Doyle that I think are going to be very good. I didn't understand. I guess understand getting a running back too at a certain extent, but I think Marlon Mack's actually solid. I think he's a pretty good running back and can be a number 1 guy. As far as Jonathan Taylor goes, I think he had a high upside. He played behind a really, really good offensive line in college, which goes a long way because there aren't that many good offensive lines in college. But Wisconsin always has one of the best ones, which I think is a big thing that propelled a lot of his big numbers. The question for me with Jonathan Taylor is he constantly ranked amongst the top in the college football in fumbles, and I think that's a big issue. A lot of that is because he was getting a ton of carries, but if he can't limit the fumbles, he's not going to be on the field very long because that's a big thing in the NFL.
Yeah, I agree. We'll go on to so for the offense, they got a 6.4, but their defense is better, I think. They have, for the edge rushers, Justin Houston, very underrated season last year. He had 11 sacks. A lot of people didn't know that. He is 31, though, so getting up there in age. He has had some injuries. You also have I'm not sure how you pronounce his name. Muhammad is his last name, who I think is better as a depth guy than a starter. I'm not crazy about their edge rushers outside of Houston, so I'm going to give the edge rusher a 5. But for their interior defensive line, you have DeForest Buckner, the new addition, who is fantastic and should be a great addition to them. I mean, he was so good for San Francisco. And then you also have Danico Autry. Again, these names are so difficult. Why can't everyone just be named like Smith and Bob? But he should be a good number 2. I think he's shown a lot, and being a number 2 next to Buckner should help him a lot. This is a 9 for interior defensive line, a 5 for edge rushers.
Yeah, I think, Houston had his best season about, 4 or 5 years, with Indianapolis last year. And I think that's a big thing for their defensive line that could go a long way. And then, of course, you go with Buckner, a great defensive tackle who's had 19 and a half sacks in 2 years. I think he can have a big year. I think, that made Indianapolis one of the biggest winners for me in the offseason is getting a guy like Buckner for that defensive line. I think just goes a long way. I think he's going to have a big year for them this next season.
Yeah, I agree. And we'll move on to the linebackers now. Obviously, the headliner is Darius Leonard. Fantastic player, just a monster. You also have Anthony Walker and Bobby Oriki. Again, another difficult name. But they're both two guys that could easily be a number 2. And so having multiple guys like that works because if one gets hurt, you can just plug another one in. This is a 10 for me, largely because of what Leonard can do.
Yeah, this front seven I think is fantastic as we are,
Mhm.
we're getting into it. I think this is a really good linebacking group combined with the new addition with Buckner at defensive tackle. I think this front seven is going to be tough to get a lot of yards on, especially on the ground. And, I think this is kind of a team that's built to beat Tennessee in that regard. I think that this is going to be tough to get a lot of yards on with this group.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is the. I think you think every team's built to beat Tennessee, but
Oh my
I think
gosh.
that. I think this is a good team. And then we'll for the secondary, you had Rock Ya-Sin, who was a good rookie last year. We'll see if he can continue to improve. You have Kenny Moore. I think is underrated and can even be a number one guy. You have Kahari Willis, who was a fourth rounder in 2019 and kind of had a breakout year as a safety. And then Malik Hooker, who is also very good. I was surprised to see Indianapolis not give him the fifth year option because I think that he is very good. I like this secondary. I'm giving this secondary an 8, and that gets their defense a total of 8.0.
Yeah, I think that this is a good defense overall. Kenny Moore is a guy I'm a big fan of, but that's also because Valdosta State go Blazers with that one. I think the thing is that he's always graded out as one of the best slot corners in the league. Now the question is, if he's moving to the outside, how does he hold up with his size there? They also have Xavier Rhodes, who was very bad last year, but maybe he has a bounce back year. Who knows at that point? But I think that this is a good group overall. I think this secondary is really strong, and I'm a big fan of it. I think this defense is going to be really good.
Yeah, no, I mean, I like the Colts. They're a very well-rounded team. I think I might have come off as a bit harsh on them for me mocking you relentlessly for a pretty reasonable take by saying the Colts are going to win a division. But I do think that one of my concerns about the Colts is just, again, the most important position, quarterback. I don't know how much I trust Rivers. I don't hate Brissett, but I think that they're looking at best mediocre quarterback play. But, there's still a lot to do very well. And I wouldn't be shocked if any of those top three teams end up winning the division by any means. For my overall rankings, now out of the 20 teams, the Titans ended up with the 6th best out of 20. Colts are right behind with the 7th best out of 20. You have the Texans, who fell all the way to 14th out of 20. But again, they're a big boomer bust team, and that's why I say it seems like Houston is either going to go 11-5 or 6-10. And also, they have a tendency to win the division. They do have the best quarterback in the division. And then Jacksonville, 18 out of 20 for the 20 overall teams.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing. Like I said, I don't think any of these teams are going to be winning the Super Bowl next season. I think that I don't have that kind of ceiling on any of these teams. I think the big thing with Indianapolis is I feel like they're the most well-rounded team. And, Rivers wasn't great last year, but at the same time, if he can cut down on his interceptions and just put up similar numbers to what he had besides the 20 interceptions last year, I think that this is a team that's probably going to win 10 games and win the division. I think the biggest thing that happened with Indianapolis, they were good to start the year last year, is they just couldn't stay healthy. The injuries took their toll. And if this team stays healthy, I don't see any reason why they aren't the best team in the division. And then the only reason, once again, that I had Houston over Tennessee is because it's hard to bet against a guy like Deshaun Watson having a huge year and potentially winning the MVP. And that's why, if it comes down to the wire, I could see Houston nabbing a wild card spot over Tennessee because of a guy like Watson.
Yeah, and you hate Isaiah Wilson.
Yeah, Isaiah Wilson is not going to be the MVP next year. That's my harsh criticism, that he won't win MVP.
No.
Not even that. I just don't think he's going to be Jack Conklin next year, but apparently that's not okay.
I know. I don't know why I all of a sudden became Isaiah Wilson's #1 fan. But okay, we'll tune in next week to find out which random offensive lineman I decide to be the world's biggest fan of. Next week, I believe it's the AFC West next week, right?
Yes, this is actually a very intriguing division for me, not to mention the Super Bowl champs. I think there's a lot of sneaky good teams in this division for next week, so it's going to be fun to talk about them.
Yeah, I think it should be good. I mean, you got obviously reigning champs, Chiefs, and then I think Denver and Vegas, who are two very interesting teams heading into 2020. And then there's the Chargers. But even them, I think them being the bad team is still a lot better than a lot of these other bad teams. So as a whole, this should be a fun division. I definitely look forward to that one.
I'm going to get yelled at in the comment section next week, so I can't wait for that. Raiders fans, looking forward to seeing you. That'll be fun.
Oh, well, what you don't think you'll get yelled at in this one by all the Isaiah Wilson stands coming at you on the comments?
I got yelled at enough during the podcast about Isaiah Wilson. I don't think I'll suffer that same wrath in the comment section, unless unless Isaiah Wilson's mom listened to this podcast or something. Who knows?
Right. Yes, exactly. All right. Well, until next time, everyone out there, have a good one.
Peace.